All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for ESSA Evidence. I'm Heather Farley, the Director of ESEA Oversight, and with me today is my teammate Lynn.
Hey, good morning. ESSA Director is Lynn Dotson here. I am West Tennessee's ESSA Compliance Coordinator. Appreciate all of you being with us.
And before we get started on the presentation, I think that it's really important to point out that everything that we covered today and all of the work that you will be doing around ESSA evidence is really closely related to the 3 state priorities you see here on the screen, which are academics, educators, and whole child. And when well thought out and planned, your federal ESSA dollars really have the potential to strengthen all 3 of these areas. And so it's really about doing the research about where you are investing your money and ensuring a good return on investment by utilizing ESSA evidence. Our agenda for the day is we are going to explain the difference between research-based and evidence-based. And then we will talk about what it actually means and what is required under ESSA and what the 4 tiers of evidence are. And then finally, we will share some resources associated with those tiers. And we'll even give you a very brief demonstration of how you can utilize one, and that is specifically the What Works Clearinghouse. So now we're going to go on research-based versus evidence-based. First, going to give a review and a rundown of the history behind all of this and how we got to this point. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act was passed in 1965, and it did place an emphasis on states and districts and schools using their federal funds for programs that were grounded in research. But at that time, there were really no requirements around this, and they really didn't define exactly what that meant. Then ESSA was reauthorized through No Child Left Behind, and that's where they really began to provide just a little bit more information, and they changed the term to scientifically based research. But again, even with that change, the law was still pretty vague, and it was left open to interpretation. So truly depending on what state, district, or even agency you were dealing with, the definition of scientifically based research could vary. So now fast forward to 2015, under Every Student Succeeds Act, this is the point where we really start to see a shift from the term research to evidence, and the term scientifically based was replaced by evidence-based. And we will talk further about those 2 in just a moment. So under ESSA, you will see that a key aspect is the commitment it has of using evidence rather than research to better drive outcomes for students. So it's just ensuring you're using and investing your federal dollars wisely by taking the time to do the research on what works best evidence-wise. And it can both improve not only student outcomes, but can increase your return on investment. And I know we are talking about federal funds with ESSA, but I do feel this is helpful with all funds that an LEA has. So the 2 different kinds of evidence, and I know we still see research-based from time to time, but research-based just relied on someone providing some good feedback or just a few supportive arguments. They would even have some testimonials or even some case studies that could have been done and more likely done by the vendor. So there was truly no evidence that had to be proven that what was being utilized really worked. And that's why under ESSA, they turned to evidence-based, because they wanted the testing and the systematic evaluation to truly occur, making sure that the studies yielded significant positive outcomes. So no longer can a vendor utilize their own data, which is great, But under evidence-based, those doing the research, they're not getting paid by the vendors to complete the study. Lynn?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Heather. So we're going to look at the tiers of evidence and what this page is telling us. Ms. Heather has already gone over what we're looking for. These tiers, first of all, they're sort of like a report card, if you will. A tier 1 would be an A-level piece of research. A tier 2 would be a B, 3 a C. I have a hard time assigning a D to tier 4. I really like tier 4 level research myself, which I'll explain in a moment. But the tier 1 would be the strongest of this set. Now, there are some criteria that would move a body of research to be assigned to tier 1 or whatever. But before I get to that, I want to give you a few things to think about. First of all, when you're looking in research, you'll see this word quite often, intervention. That's the key word. Sometimes you may see the word strategy. Just know that in intervention or strategy, for those of you, and I see many of the directors here, many of them, some of them here know more about educational research than I do, but it's whatever is being studied. So if I'm looking at a new reading program, for example, that my intervention is this reading program. For those of you that are more knowledgeable in research, that's our independent variable being studied in the research. Also, as Ms. Heather just went over, she mentioned that evidence-based is looking at experimental design. It's looking at two things. It's looking at experimental design, that is, why is the research set up in a good experimental sound way? That's the first thing. The research has to be of quality. The second thing about the research is, did it show positive outcomes? Now, you'll see the word significant. Those of you that know more about research, you realize that is a mathematical term, significant, dealing with how many standard deviations from the mean and confidence intervals. Now, I'm going to go through each of these as quickly as needed. I do want to let you know, we are, as Ms. Heather said, we're going to look at some databases where the research is reviewed for you. But having said that, there are some key terms that sometimes you have to make connections in order to assign the tier level, especially when you get into Informed Tennessee that Ms. Heather will go over. First of all, tier 1, I told you that was your A level research. This is sound research. And why is that? Well, you see these words, randomized, well-conducted study. Well, this is a randomized controlled trial. You'll see those words quite often in research. And one thing about good research is honest about itself. It will tell you if they had any reservations about their experimental design, or if the experimental design started off as a randomized controlled trial. You may see the letters RCT, and then later something happened. They tend to be pretty honest about this. So as we look at a tier 1, first of all, what is a randomized controlled trial? Well, it's a really simple kind of thing. And I really think it's harder to do this in an educational setting versus, say, a medical research setting or something of this nature. So if I'm wanting to look at a new reading program, and I have two, if you will, two different groups. Think about basic research. I have the group receiving this new reading program, and I have a group of students receiving our normal curriculum. The ones receiving the new intervention would be our experimental group. The ones that are receiving our regular instruction would be the control group. So those are my two groups. And then I look through the year, and at the end of the, if you will, the post-test, I'm looking at the contrast and comparisons between the outcomes of those students. Do they become better readers as we look at comprehension or whatever? And RCT, what that does is it says that each student had a 50-50 shot of falling in the experimental group or falling in the control group, that it was not assigned. That's what an RCT is. I do think in education, sometimes that's a little hard. So we have Mr. Randall Fenimore on here and say that he and I were in the same class, and we happen to fall in, say, the experimental group. Well, the teacher may say, you can't have those two together. You're going to move Lynn out. He'll talk too much. We already have an RCT problem as soon as that happens. So an RCT is really the gold class of research. And then we see at the end of that trial, did we have positive outcomes for the students that received the intervention, or was it the same result? Did they both score the same on Tennessee Ready or whatever? That's how that works. Tier 2, again, you're going to see positive student outcomes pretty much on all tiers. So the differences really sometimes really just fall mainly within the experimental design. And so with a tier 2, you see a quasi-experimental. That means that the RCT broke down. It might have started off that way, and you'll see matched here. Maybe they were assigned, just as the teacher not letting me be in the same class as Mr. Fenimore. Just something a little off with RCT. But that does not mean that there's anything wrong with the tier 2 level piece of research. We can still trust the results of the research, and we can make conclusions whether to not to use that research to support the way we're spending our federal, and as Ms. Heather said, our GP funds as well. A tier 3 is correlational. And if you're looking at a body of research, it pretty much will tell you every time if it's correlational. That's a key word to let you know it's a tier 3. You still have the significant positive student outcomes, but a correlational study means that the intervention itself, we cannot say that the results was because of the intervention. I tend to think of correlational studies as research that I did not set up, that I discovered later on. So for example, in one school, in my LEA, I'm looking at 3rd grade science, I may have co-teaching happening with 3rd grade science. Another school may just have the single classroom teacher. I discovered this through the year. At the end of the year, I see that the co-teaching school had stronger science testing results. But I cannot say it's because of co-teaching, because it's correlational. And I use this one quite often. It's just like every time I wash and wax my Mazda 3 car, imported from Japan, 100% Japanese, that it rains. Every time I wash my car, it rains. But I can't say washing my car makes it rain, of course. It just seems to be a positive correlation that it seems to rain more often than not when I wash my car. So that's what a correlational study is. We can use that to support our federal spending. A tier 4 is a really strong theory, is what it is. We don't necessarily have this research underway. It may be started, but we are certain that we're going to see a strong result on the experimental group that's receiving whatever the intervention may be. And we have a body of research to support that seems to tell us that we will have a strong result. And so I can use tier 4 to support my federal funds. When you're looking at your own LEA data, and many of you have, I can speak to West Tennessee, and I can speak to Mid-Cumberland to some degree too when I served them. A lot of directors, strong data gurus, and will quite happily show me their data when they're wanting to spend something. The best that we can probably do with LEA level data to support federal spending, the best would be tier 3. But most of the time, that's going to be a tier 4 level of data. Doesn't mean that your data is not good enough to use. As a matter of fact, I might like your data better than a tier 1 research that was done in California in the middle of Los Angeles, you see. That geographic, those demographic differences and so forth, I would probably prefer my own LEA data in that case. And fortunately, we can assign that tier 4 and use it. The next screen is going to show us there's really only one grant. You'll probably have a hard time seeing this screen. This is an old slide we've used probably from the beginning of this when we started talking more about ESSA evidence. when we're looking at our consolidated applications, Title 1 through Title 5, any of the 4 levels, tiers of research we can use. It's fine. There's only one that I know of, and that is the school improvement. So if we have a school improvement grant for our ATSI, TSI designated schools, we can only use top 3 tiers of research to support that kind of, for that particular grant money. But for our other grants, any of the 4 tier levels can be used to support our spending. Okay, Ms. Heather. And I'm just going to move past this slide. We're going to talk more about this slide in just a moment. This is basically a rubric from, and we're going to go ahead and go into our resources, and I'll talk about this slide with you. We're going to look at the WhatWorks Clearinghouse. We're going to spend a little more time with WhatWorks, but we're also going to tell you about some other databases that reviews research that's out there, and pretty much will tell you to some degree what the tier level is. You may still have to connect some dots. So as Ms. Heather takes us to the clearinghouse, the slide that I just moved past was a rubric that WhatWorks Clearinghouse uses to assign their tier levels on research that they review. And this will be coming up in just a moment. And WhatWorks Clearinghouse, let me start off with, thank you, there it is right here. So the WhatWorks Clearinghouse is a mega database, maybe it might be a better term for it, that looks at all kinds of educational research. Now, they don't necessarily review every piece of research out there, but they do review a lot of it. Now, WhatWorks Clearinghouse is one of the databases that's associated with the Institute of Educational Sciences, the IES. Now, IES is sort of like that data person in your LEA that y'all may, well, I have directors on here that are that data person, but just think of that data person in your LEA, that data guru. That's really what IES is to the U.S. Department of Education. They do more than just data. They fund research and things of this nature, but that's really what we're talking about here. So we're looking at Tier 1 and Tier 2. This is the way WhatWorks Clearinghouse assigns one of these grades, if you will, to a body of research. So as we look under Tier 1, you'll see 4 bullets, and you'll see the words without reservations. That just means that when IES reviewed this research, they had no concerns about the experimental design, that it was sound. That means without worry, if you will. And they have, therefore, no concerns about the results, that the results showed significant positive outcomes, and therefore they trust the design, they trust the results. It gets a Tier 1 assigned to it. So the other little bullets that make up a Tier 1, and it's very similar to Tier 2, is that I said the statistic of the positive outcomes, I mentioned that one, but there has to be a population of at least 350 students in the study. So the researcher had to have at least that many students that they were studying and before being able to say, hey, this intervention works. That may not sound like a lot of students to you. That's not a large population, but it's okay. It really is. When you look at medical research, and I remember back to January when Pfizer had submitted its research to the FDA and trying to get that emergency approval, there were a lot of questions out there about their experimental design, and mainly about population. And if any of you recall this, I remember very clearly some of the criticism toward Pfizer at that time was that they did not have enough people of color involved with their research, that they made up a smaller population of the big N, if you will, that was being studied. Well, typically, the more folks involved being studied, the more confident you can be about the outcome. But I will give you this as well. As you increase the population in a research study, you also increase the amount of variance between those folks. So when Pfizer did its population, it's looking at folks that have high blood pressure, folks that have diabetes. These are all variables, if you will, that can throw your population and sometimes your results off. So for educational purposes, I've said enough about that. 350 students is a good sized population to fit a study. The last bullet is that the research had to be done at 2 different schools or sites, if you will. And that is, that could be in the same LEA. If you think about your own elementary schools, they can be extremely different from one another. Not every elementary school in your LEA is the same. South side to the north side, west to the east, they can be extremely different. So you can have a tier 1 level research done within the same LEA because they did study over 2 different schools. That can work. Again, without reservations is without worry. The only difference with a tier 2 assignment on What Works Clearinghouse is what hurts it is the experimental design. Everything else is the same. But say the RCT, the randomized controlled trial, that it did not, maybe they started that way, it didn't stay that way. The things that happen with research in schools, these are some of the, I'll just give you some ideas. Attrition can be a really big problem for research. Did you keep the same group of students in the experimental group and control group throughout the whole year? Or did students leave and other students come in? See, that hurts the design to some degree. Did you keep the same teacher the whole year? See, that's an attrition issue with the research. Did the principal do something different through the school year? So say that the intervention, say the reading program needs 115 minutes every day, 5 days a week. That's the way it's set up. And say the principal started with 115 minutes, but every day, but when they got to December, they realized their math scores are not doing so well. So the principal wants to increase math RTI time. Well, we all know there's only so many minutes available in a day. The principal took from the research group minutes to get more math RTI because that's what the school is needing. Again, that hurts attrition to some degree as far as time. Even if you do have some attrition problems, though, we can still have a very high tier level assigned to a piece of research, as you can see, because we got positive outcomes. We can still trust the outcomes. Population's still there. The 2 sites are there. And the attrition was not egregious enough to really just throw the research out. And with that, Ms. Heather, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lynn. We are going to do a very quick high-level overview of utilizing What Works Clearinghouse. And since we're on this page, you can always go to the menu up here at the top, and we're going to go to Find Evidence. I like the more simplistic Find What Works from Systematic Reviews. And let's say I did a deep dive into my data. And one of my focuses is I want to focus on literacy for my ELs, especially in pre-K. And notice we could go right here with the literacy. And we could have gone with pre-K. And to save time, we are going to utilize Literacy Express as the intervention we want to look at. You will notice there are evidence of effectiveness. And if you hover over it, it has the blue has the positive or potentially positive. And they always put those blue first. I'm going to try to scroll slowly here. Oh, there's a lot of blue here. But notice you will have the grayed out, which have mixed effect or not discernible. And then if you kept scrolling, you would have a question mark. So notice it does state grades examined. And if I did want to compare a few, I could do that as well. And notice Literacy Express breaks it down into different domains. All of them were pre-K. It does go over the number of students that were utilized in the study. And let's say I want to go over phonological processing. I see there are 3 studies that meet the standards. And notice it does state the number of students that are in each study. And I'm going to go with the one that has 722. You'll notice this is a tier 1. And you have a lot of different things you can read here when it comes to that. So you can do a little bit more of a deeper dive into ensuring what the data said and things of that nature. And you'll even notice, and something Lynn can tie this to, it even has links us to ERIC. One thing I think that is beneficial when going through What Works Clearinghouse is kind of looking at the demographics. Notice this was used in California and Florida, and it goes over the race, the male, female, and it breaks it down even further throughout the studies. And this tells just an overview of the study, and it does provide additional resources. So this is just a high-level overview of how you can utilize What Works Clearinghouse. Lynn?
Thank you, Ms. Heather. We had a director is having trouble seeing the screen. Do I have any other directors that cannot see the screen? All right, so I would take that the rest are seeing. Anyway, I hope that works for you, Director. Thank you, Dr. Hollingsworth, and good morning to you. All right, Ms. Heather just gave you a quick run through on What Works Clearinghouse, and I think a lot of you are familiar with it. There is this ESSA for Evidence. This is another database where research is reviewed for you. Thank you, Mr. Fenimore. And Ms. Heather, if you will, take us to this database. I want to tell y'all, I really liked What Works Clearinghouse. I'm nothing against it, but I really like what Evidence for ESSA is doing. This site is supported by several universities from around the world. The University of Belgium, I'm thinking of October and all the festivities of October. University of Italy's involved. And so this is kind of a world site. One of the things I really like about this particular database, and it has some downsides, is it's so easy to use. As a matter of fact, it's so easy to use, I don't even believe there's a tutorial on here to tell you how to use it. It's just very easy to use. One of the things about it, if you'll notice the top of the screen, you'll see there are 5 categories to find programs that have research attached to them under reading, math. Here they are. Maybe there's 6. I was thinking there was 5, so I don't know. I can't count very well this morning. Whereas you look at What Works, and it had like 12 categories of finding, and there's some overlap between those categories, of course. But right from the get-go, it looks simpler to use. And if Heather would just quickly click on reading, for example, I'll show you what this looks like, how they do research. We're under, I think, reading at the moment. You'll see the strong research that is cited and reviewed are right at the top. And these are program names, interventions, if you will, and then you can quickly find the citations behind them. So this can be quite easy for you to use. The filters work well on here. It does link back to What Works Clearinghouse. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to show you much more, but do visit this site. I do think you'll like it. The only downside is it doesn't give you every research in the world. It's really just giving you the top research, which is fine, the higher tier. Now, they do have some lower tiered on as well, but it's for most of the programs, it's like 2 to 3 citations with each program, which is enough. You only need 1 for your Informed Tennessee. And our next meta database we're going to show you very briefly is one I believe you're all familiar with. I have a nostalgic kind of feel when it comes to ERIC. It's what got me through college. I remember, and as Miss Heather takes us there, the site has improved so much from when I remember when I first used it. Back when I used it, the best I could do was find the abstracts alone, and then I would go to the black binders to find the full article. There's plenty of full articles on here, and we don't have time to go through it. I believe you're all familiar with this site, but if it's been a while since you've been here, go here. As a matter of fact, if I'm looking for research, I'm coming here first. I like What Works. I like Evidence for ESSA, but I'm coming to ERIC. I'm familiar with it. And the other cool thing about ERIC, where it has grown over the years, its filtering system is top notch. So you can find research that has been that was published in just 2021, the most recent. You can expand out the borders of time for research you're looking for. But you can do research by full text. You want the full research PDF to be available to you. You can filter that way. You can filter through peer-reviewed journal only. But another thing about ERIC, and I should have mentioned this in our last meeting, is it does have a lot of gray material out there. Editorials. Now, I know that's not evidence-based. You can't use those citations, but they are so interesting as you're really doing your research, say on a program. Items submitted to magazines, just magazines, articles, maybe a testimonial or something. So ERIC will give you not only the best in the world of the random controlled trials, but it gives you all the way down to just almost newspaper articles at times as well. Again, you can filter for all of that. It's a wonderful site. There's a thesaurus here because, you know, a lot of us use different names for the same positions in schools and things of this nature. So the thesaurus can be a help to you as well with ERIC. And it is a part of the IES just as what works. And so they do link back and forth with one another. And Ms. Heather, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Lynn. So if you have been a federal programs director during the last Inform Tennessee district planning, you will notice that this is where you place your evidence for ESSA federal funding. And notice, although this example does give a Tier 1 strong evidence, like Lynn stated, Tier 4 is allowed utilizing your own evidence and then giving a brief report of the findings you found. So that is allowable for those that have been utilizing some intervention that they've had for quite a few years and they know that it's successful and they are still utilizing it. So do know in Inform Tennessee, there's nothing wrong with utilizing Tier 3 and 4 as long as you have your own data to back it up that it is effective in your LEA or in the schools that it's being utilized. And this is a very lengthy resources, although I do think they are all pretty relevant. And notice we did keep the What Works Clearinghouse on there, ESSA Evidence and ERIC. One that I specifically like is the Non-Regulatory Guidance on using evidence to strengthen education investments. It's only 8 or 9 pages and it's a very, I think, easy read and it goes over what each tier is. So I do like utilizing that one. And I do keep it handy when we as an ESSA team are looking over the tiers of evidence in Inform Tennessee. And do we have any questions? If not, these are some contacts for the ESSA and IDA side. And this is where you can share your feedback. Go back to, which one? Someone say go back one slide.
It's probably the resources page, Ms.
Okay, and do know with this page, we will be posting this in ePlan TDOE resources. As well as the recording.
Yeah, and Ms. Heather, I would think the slide deck